museum has been open since 1964, and we are open this year, Thursday through Sunday, noon to 5, Memorial Day through Labor Day. We've got a lot of new items here for sale for tourists, and we've got a new layout to show you. Lots to see.
Well, if you've been noticing people coming in here, we're recording this in the middle of the day, but it's a Friday, it's a crappy day outside, but there still seems to be a lot of people here.
Yes,
so you draw the crowds no matter what.
Yes, we do. We've never been at a loss for crowds here. We've always had a nice attendance record.
So tell me about the train that wasn't always here, was it?
Okay, this is a brand new layout. This layout was originally started by member Donna Weiser and her son. And then members Mike Clancy and Tim Bedang actually took it over and put down 3 gauges of track. You had the O gauge on the outside, you got HO in the middle, and you got N gauge on the inside. And each one is half the size of the other. And then we had installed on this thing an automated system where you press a button and the train's running for about 1.5 minutes and then switch off. So it's
can people do that are going by?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they can press the button right here.
Oh, all right, cool.
And there you go. It starts running on its own. And unless we have a derailment, which we do from time to time, it stays running for about 1.5 minutes and then shuts off.
So how long has this been here?
This is the first year for it. It was built over the winter time this past year.
Well, you weren't open last year because of COVID, just like
right.
Everything else.
Yes, we were.
So you had a chance to do this, and
yeah, we did a lot of other work in here too. In fact, our station office over there, we had a roof leak in 2018 and 19, so we had to tear it apart and then fix everything, and it was also put back together in the winter of 2019 and completely repainted. So that's all like new right now.
You mentioned that this place opened as a museum in 1964.
Yes.
So, but maybe you should give a little background as to this was a train station before that. And when this was built, this building is over 100 years old.
Yes, the building was constructed in 1900 by the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern Railway, which was later absorbed by the New York Central. This design was almost what you would call an early modular design. It could be built in 3 different sizes, and if you look at the windows we have windows that are in pairs, and we've got 4 bays or 4 pairs of windows in this station, which is the biggest. And if you go to Northeast Pennsylvania, they've got the same depot, but a 3 bay, so it's a little bit smaller, but basically the same structure. So it was an early modular structure of type. When the depot first opened, they had separate waiting rooms for men and then women, and that was mainly because men smoked. And where we are now was the men's waiting room, and then the women's waiting room is on the east side. And they, some years later, they wound up opening it up and made it just one big room like that. But that's an interesting fact for this old depot. There was a lot of people here in town who were very interested in opening up a railroad museum because the nickel plate at the time wanted to donate the locomotive we now have, and then we got the hopper car and the caboose from the Bessemer Railroad, and I believe it was still the New York Central at the time, let us use the depot as the museum. And that stayed in force for many years until it became Penn Central and then Conrail. And Conrail, sometime in the early 70s, wanted to either sell the properties or tear them down. So the museum volunteers raised the money to buy the station, and then they donated it, I believe, to the city of Conneaut.
Okay.
And that was in 19 77 they did that. So it took several years, but I guess that the railroad just wanted to get rid of the properties and all the liabilities. So
I can remember when I was a young newspaper reporter in Conneaut in like the mid to late 70s, there was always a nickel plate day. And you'd have all the old nickel plate retirees, and essentially all they did, I was a young guy at the time,
Yeah.
and you go around and you interview a bunch of old guys sitting in lawn chairs.
Yeah.
Nickel plate day was, they'd have snacks and stuff for them. But now it's kind of sad that all of those people are gone now.
yes, I don't think they've had a nickel plate day for many, many years. But I've seen some of the old newsletters that we used to make up every month, where they would host that, and you'd have quite a lot of people out here, and everybody just had a great time. But like you said, unfortunately, they're all gone. There's a lot of stuff stored in here that I think a lot of the present members just have no idea what's back there, because we've been taking in all sorts of donations for over 50 years, and
You can't show them all.
can't show them all. In fact, a lot of them I've never even seen before.
But you have on the walls all kinds of photos.
Yes, we do. Most of them came from the railroad, or from, I guess, railroad employees. And, it's all like, it's all local history, and it's also American history. And in the room over there, we have all sorts of displays. Other than the models you see in the display cases, everything that's in there is something that was used in everyday railroad work. Lanterns or oil cans or like a telegrapher's keys, stuff like that. And then outside we have the train, which has been here since 1964, October 64, and it's been here all those years. It's been repainted recently, and it's our main attraction. All right, here we have all kinds of displays. Mainly what you see in here are models of old trains that were hand built by somebody. This model right here was built by one of the passenger car manufacturers, and then used as an advertising thing to show how the cars were assembled. Because the lighter weight cars that came in just before World War II were completely different from I guess what everybody was used to riding on, and this showed them how they were built and how strong they were. You see a lot of framed photographs in the showcases which show locomotives on a nickel plate, and also some of the people who worked on them. Then up above you see lanterns, and around here you see oil cans, you see a headlight. These are all things that were used in everyday railroad work atmosphere. And over here we have this whole case and the wallboard, which was built by member Rudy Campbell, and it shows all of the traction history in this area. Traction meaning street cars, trolley cars, and stuff like that. And he put this all together himself, and it's a wonderful, extremely informative display.
Yeah.
And so this is all traction, because we did have a trolley line or streetcar line that came through town from Erie, went to Ashtabula, and then connected to Jefferson to Cleveland. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long because it got started right at the start of the automobile era, and they had about maybe 9 to 10 years around there before they started losing too much money, and then they were gone because everybody wanted to drive cars.
They wanted to be independent.
Yeah, and then it happened again in the late 1950s with the Federal Highway Act. We had I-90 open about 1960 or 61, and that eventually killed all the passenger train traffic between Cleveland and Buffalo.
One thing I also like to note, though, is that if you had a relative that was on the railroad here, there's probably a good chance that there's a photograph of he or she here.
We have folks come here all the time, and they find photographs of either their father or their grandfather, in one of these old photographs, either standing by a locomotive or standing with a group of people. early this year, I was contacted by somebody who knew that there was a photograph in here of the Roundhouse men, and they wanted to know if I could copy it for them. So I pulled it out, took it out of the frame, scanned it, and then sent it to him as a JPEG and put it back in the frame, put it back here. He was so happy.
Tell me about Abe Lincoln's railroad pass. Do you know how that got here? It's over there someplace.
I'm not sure how it got here. There is a little display on Abe Lincoln, because when he was inaugurated, he took a train from Springfield, Illinois, and that train took him through Conneaut and going back, and then eventually he brought him to Washington, D.C. And when he was assassinated, his funeral train covered the same route. They used a lot of the same crews, the same engines, though they did use the private car that was built expressly for him, which was the, I guess, original Air Force One, the very first one. But he never got to ride in it alive. And it wound up becoming his funeral car. And that train, on its way to Springfield, that had left Erie, it came through Conneaut at 4-something in the morning on April 28th, 1865, and it stopped here briefly because it was written in the journal that the War Department kept, that there were hundreds of people lining the tracks, and there were bonfires burning. This station wasn't here, but the original station that was a little bit west was here at the time, and they said that it was draped in mourning cloth. They also stopped in Kingsville, and they stopped in Ashtabula briefly, and just kept on going. But I think it's some very extremely interesting history for this place.
Yeah.
There was a lot that happened here in Conneaut over the years. And, I think
and a lot of it has to do with the railroad.
Yes.
And all the pictures, you could spend a day just looking at the photographs.
This is one museum. You could not go and absorb everything in here in one day, in my one visit. You'd have to make several visits to do it.
And it's kind of, doesn't look that big, but it's just a lot of stuff packed in here.
Oh yes.
So that's
that's a very good
if you think, well, I could go through here in 15 minutes and be on my way to Omaha or something.
Well, you could, but you're not going to get the
right. There's no point actually coming for that.
Right. So I mean, you'd have to really come through here and just look at everything, absorb everything, and if you have any questions about anything, ask one of the members here, and we would be glad to answer your questions if we can.
Speaking of that, you, like everybody else everywhere, volunteers.
Yes, we sorely need some volunteers for our museum. At present, we have about 6 or 7 active members, and I would say the average age of those active members is probably in the early 70s. So, we need to get some more, and hopefully, some younger blood in here, but just folks who could spend like one afternoon here, either Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And
this used to be open 7 days a week in the summer.
Yes, it was.
But the lack of volunteers.
Yes. Well, we have a scale over there that still works. You drop in a coin and you can see how much you weigh, and it's still accurate after all these years.
For a penny, it's cheaper to come here and drop the penny than to buy a scale.
Yeah, right, because if you're going to weigh yourself and not be happy with the results, it only costs you a penny.
That's right.
We also have a couple of bells here that you can ring, and they're loud. Okay, this is a locomotive bell that was used on a steam locomotive, and this would be rung at the station when they were starting up or when they were going through a crossing, just to let the people know the train was coming. And it's
loud.
Pretty loud. We have a louder one over there. That plus a steam whistle, you couldn't miss it. And that was in the days before the earphones and earplugs. We have a very old time clock back here that is something to see. It no longer works, but just looking at how it's done, it would record your time on rolled paper. And it's quite a piece of machinery. Back in the day when they used to build stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now it's all automated. And at the very end there, We have a homemade display of the old Hewletts that they used to unload the ore boats in Conneaut Harbor.
And which was invented by George Hewlett, who's from
Yes, he was a
Conneaut.
Conneaut native.
Yeah.
Though at the time he was working for a big company in Cleveland area. And,
So I just noticed the stove there.
yes, we have several coal stoves in the museum of all different types.
So I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but is that similar to what was used on the trains when the Ashtabula train disaster happened? Because I know that a lot of the people died in fires because it was in December, and the cars were heated with coal or wood stoves.
Right, they were heated with either wood or coal stoves, and they weren't of the type that were, because later they said that you have to have a stove for heating the car. It has to be able that, God forbid, the car turns over, that stove will close itself up and the fire goes out. But you got to remember too that these coaches were built of wood and they were varnished to the hilt. Everything in them was flammable.
Yeah.
So if they did catch fire, you better get yourself out of there quick because it's going to burn pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of folks lost their lives in wintertime wrecks where the stoves, caught the car on fire. And then they started developing what they called steam heat. They would take steam from the locomotive boiler, they would pipe it through the cars, and they would heat the cars with that. So there was no more need for coal stoves after about the turn of the century.
So it is raining, as who can believe it's been raining around here. But, so this is the best we could do without getting so talking about it. So talk about the train from here.
Okay, this is a train that was brought in here in 1964 toward the, I think, right around the middle of October. And they brought it in on the tracks over here. They built a switch, put in some other track, and brought it down here, and it's been here ever since.
And it was recently painted?
Yes, we had it completely repainted in 2019 by a gentleman who, that's all he does is he paints historic trains and such. And he wasn't cheap, but he did a good job. And it's holding up quite nicely, and it looks great.
So this is 2021 when we're doing this. And right now people can't, they used to be able to climb up and get in and walk around and stuff. Is that going to happen again? Is this a
We
COVID
hope we
thing?
can open it up again next season. Right now we stay closed because of the COVID and all the wood surfaces which you can't sanitize, and if you keep trying to spray sanitizer on them, you might wind up going and ruining any finish that's on them. So, and if you go up in the engine cab, you can't social distance. It's just too closed in up there. So just for safety of everyone.
But chances are, if people are watching this in 2022, they'll be able to.
We hope. This is what they call maintenance of way equipment. That's a motorized cart that could pull cars behind it, and the people who worked on the tracks back then would run on those things. They would carry their tools on there, any supplies they have. The one in the middle is what they call a hand car. You get one person on each side, you would pump it up and down, and you could propel yourself down the track at about 25 miles an hour.
There've been a lot of movies with hand cars,
Yes.
usually comedies.
Well, one of Buster Keaton's last films was called Rail Rodder, and he supposedly swims the Atlantic, winds up in Canada, from the UK. He gets on a motorized car like that, but not quite the same design, and he takes it all the way across Canada to the West Coast, and it's very, very funny film, but it was the last one he ever did.
Well, Buster Keaton, probably his greatest film was The General,
Yes.
which is about a train during the Civil War. It was stolen by the Union, and he was a Confederate, was trying to get it back.
Well, he did all his own stunts on that.
It's absolutely amazing what he could do.
Well, supposedly the director told the cameraman to keep shooting till either he was done or dead. This HO scale layout that you see was built by a member, the late Paul Prescott.
And we got a train going by.
Yeah, a real one.
Real one, yeah.
Sometime in the 1970s, it's one of the more well-liked items by all the kids who come here. You know, they love to watch this run, and we installed another, I guess, you know, like remote start button on this, like we have on the other layout, so they can come up, stand by the window, press the button, the trains run, and they love to do that because that means that they're operating them themselves. So, and you could almost say that this might be a smaller version of our town Conneaut, if you want to use your imagination a little bit. As you can see, we have a railroad train on display down there, just like we have here, and we have several members that go and donate their time and effort to keep this in running order, because it's always maintenance on this. Okay, this is where we sell all our souvenirs, and we recently got in some new shirts, which are right here. Which shows an image of our locomotive, number 755, and these are for sale. We have small through 4X, and then we also have some new mugs which were made locally here at the Shirt Shack. They've got the engine on one side, and on the back is a caboose. We have large and small, as well as all the other stuff we sell that the kids like. We have postcards, all sorts of nice things.
Books?
Books, yes, we have a few books there. We also have a case up front which has in it old books and things like that, and those are for sale, to those who might be interested in them. So when you stop down here, take a look around, you might see something you like.